Today I want to report on a really troubling story. First off, I want to say that we should go after child predators anywhere we can find them. Now, what worries me is when we're talking mass surveillance, a lot of the historical way to get your foot in the door, um, for example, was using terrorism, for example. What this story talks about is Apple is now installing an automated scanning system that's going to scan all of your messages and all of your pictures. Now, what makes this really concerning is it doesn't take a lot of tweaking to turn this into a speech scanning tool where things could be flagged for other reasons that have nothing at all to do with protecting children. And that's why this is such a slippery slope. Everybody wants to protect children, and it's difficult to say you're against something that is meant to protect children. You'll undoubtedly have a lot less people willing to stand up against something that portrays itself as a tool to catch child predators. Because, of course, everyone wants to catch child predators, everyone wants to see them held accountable. So it's a tricky situation. And I made the video anyway because I know how dangerous something like this is if it's expanded into other uses and other subjects where it could go as far as political and speech. And when you look at the studies, they show that mass surveillance in itself, regardless of the reasoning, has created meekness, fear, and self censorship. That's a big deal. For people who believe in free speech, they should really be against mass surveillance because it entirely causes people to think about everything they say, to have to really think about it before they say what they're thinking. And that inhibits free speech in itself, just the existence of the surveillance in itself. That alone inhibits speech and also puts journalists in fear. And of course, that results in people not being properly informed about world events. Even worse, may help misinformation rise to the top. So, the aggressive plan to thwart child predators and pedophiles as it is being sold as, now remember, it's being sold as this, but what undoubtedly happens is there's a little more nudging, a little more tweaking, and the use cases, they get expanded over time. Another example, when they made a censorship bill to build a censorship hardware into Arizona computers, they wanted to include a piece of hardware that would help censor, and they actually named that bill after protecting children as well. What ends up happening in the end. And I think it's something worth standing up against, which is mass surveillance in our devices. I think that's just, a horrible direction. People did not see the rise of Hitler coming. People did not see the rise of Stalin coming. People did not see the rise of Mao coming 20 years before it happened. And that's the point here. We don't know how this technology is going to be used in the future. And that's the real issue. The systems that we build today are going to go in the hands of people that we cannot control who they are in the future. And that's why it's so important to push for freedom in technology, to support organizations like Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation. It's really important to keep these open source systems afloat and these human rights activism groups afloat, because you never know how the future is going to go. And that's why I'm really concerned about different types of technology that gets built, and especially on the mass surveillance end, because it is antithetical to democracy. And when you're creating systems that cause self-censorship, that cause people to be afraid to speak up, to speak out, to make their voice heard, you're creating systems that completely subvert and destroy democracy itself. And I know this is going on a bit of a rant here, but I'm trying to paint the big picture, and that's my point in doing this video. I'm talking about the big mistake Apple is making today. I think they're making a huge mistake, and I think it's going to really hurt the company in the long run. And I was honestly, I'm really sad to read this because I know how these systems can get twisted, how people can pressure them to use it for other purposes, and how you really may not know everything about the story. We know about what's being published publicly. So that's another aspect that's important. It's important to think critically about these things, to not just take what's being sold to you in your mainstream media. That's basically what I wanted to show you guys, that this big change is happening and Apple has been making some changes that are really concerning. For example, they had the end-to-end encryption and everything, and then apparently the cloud key became available in one way or another, and there's been some unfortunate compromises on their stance on privacy and the rights of the individual. And of course, it's very controversial when you start to label it as protecting children, which I am for. I am for protecting children, which makes it even harder to speak up on these topics, just because of the fact the way they word it is very tricky. And we have to be observant and think critically about how these things could be used in the long run for not so great purposes. So that's what I have today, guys. Hope you like this take on the latest on Apple. Like I said, I'm really sad to see Apple doing this self-scanning system on their own users who pay a lot of money for those devices. So you really can't count on this being just used for this one purpose. So keep that in mind. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be back later with more on your privacy.